Public Works Committee. It is May 21st, another perfect day in paradise. And we have an interesting agenda. We're doing general services stuff again. So things that we know nothing about that we get to ask a lot of questions about. So first up, from the police department, it's Captain Dave Hagar. Welcome to Public Works in the afternoon, Dave.
Chairman and council members, what you have in front of you is basically a renewal of a contract with the North Idaho College for the school resource officer. In general, we pay for the benefits. North Idaho College pays for the actual wages for that. Comes out to about 63% of the total cost is what North Idaho College pays. The only new part of this contract outside of what we've had in the past is that we've identified how we're going to split training costs. If they identify something they think is very important for the officer to attend, that not that we wouldn't think is not important, but they really want them to do that, and it will also benefit the law enforcement, that we agree to split those costs 50-50. Up until now, they haven't had any part of the reimbursement for us, so it actually will help out a little bit more with those training costs. Other than that, there's nothing significant. There's nothing new with that contract. It's a great benefit to both the city of Coeur d'Alene with the amount of work that we have down in the fort grounds in the North Idaho College area, and for getting to be an SRO in a community of older people outside of the high school age. And we're very unique in the country to have that, and it's been very successful.
Kiki, any questions?
Is this a year-round?
This is a year-round because they do have the summer school down there, and they actually have a lot more kind of business, so it's the outside, not NIC, that kind of infiltrates NIC at that time. And so again, it's beneficial because the officer can respond to the beach area if needed or into the fort grounds community. So we get a fair amount of benefit from this.
I was wondering. Thank you.
Dan, any questions?
Well, no, I would add by way of probably overboard on disclosure, I am a employee of NIC, but this doesn't intersect with my work. But on the other hand, I've been able to observe firsthand and in some of our employee meetings and things, the SRO come and do education, and yeah, it's a great thing. And I think there's just something about having that, you know, the black and white car sitting out there in front, very obvious. So, yeah, I think it's a great thing.
Sounds good, Dave. We'll look for a motion.
I'd make a motion to recommend council approve a contract with North Idaho College to provide school resource officer services for the school year 2018-19.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any other thoughts, comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Consent, please. Moving on. Thanks, Dave. And another one from out in the water department. Dion, come on down.
Hello. Just have two electric motors. We'd like to get approval to surplus them out and get rid of them.
Those were good pictures you had in the packet.
Thank you. They've been in service a long time. They've both been replaced with efficiency motors, and they're not doing anything for us right now but taking up space.
Dan, any questions?
No, I was just going to also compliment on this picture. It looks kind of like the original robot on Lost in Space, but probably from about the same vintage. So
That's how old it is.
So.
Good. Kiki?
Nope.
Any questions? Good. Look
Okay.
for a motion.
Well, I would make a motion to recommend that council declare one 250 horsepower electric motor and one 350 horsepower electric motor as surplus properties, and authorize water department staff to dispose of the motors at auction or to a scrap metal dealer.
Just out of curiosity, if you scrap metal those, then does the money, if you get anything out of that, come back to the water department fund?
I believe it does.
Is that what you usually do with them, or are they auctioned off?
Usually, these are the first ones I've taken to auction. Everything else like that, we just load them on a trailer and take them to auction, and we've done pretty good.
Great.
As far as returns on them.
I was just curious.
I've got a
Second.
motion. Oh, thank you. Been moved and seconded. Any other questions? You're good. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Approved. Did you vote yes? I can't remember.
I think I did.
Okay.
I did,
On consent,
okay.
please. Thank you.
I could have
Thank
thought
you.
of
Thanks, Dion.
Have a good evening.
One of our favorite guys here at Public Works, Tim Martin's in town. Tim, welcome.
Thank you, Chairman, council members. Never fix this. I'm here today to talk to you and look for consent to declare some various pieces of used assets, items, and equipment for the auction. This here is a Parks Department rig. This has got 130,000 miles. It burns oil, and they have already replaced this vehicle. Here's a fun one. This is the one you used to see running around the downtown streets of Coeur d'Alene.
Can we put that in?
Amazingly, this thing has over 17,000 hours on it. It's the old Cushman that we used to, the parking vehicle downtown. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. Over dang near 18,000 miles or hours on this vehicle. Here's a couple used ATVs out of the Parks Department. The upper one in the upper left is no longer serviceable, and they've actually taken parts off this one, and the other one is been replaced in this year's budget, and there's no need for it. It's got some issues with the motor and brakes on it. This is out of the street fleet. This was a mainline vehicle that we used in the winter months as a de-icer rig, and then in the summer we pulled our roller with it. It has a little over 54,000 miles on it, but it's got some serious issues with the brakes and transmission. And this is one of our older sanders. You replaced this in this year's budget. It's been out back. We did not use this vehicle. It's got some issues also. I wanted to also remind you the pickup that I showed you a moment ago. We've replaced that vehicle this year out of our used equipment line. We picked up another 1 ton to do our de-icer spraying with it. And with that, I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about these. Historically, these items have all gone over to Post Falls to the auction site. We looked at a different auction site in the Rathdrum area. This typically was not vehicles they were looking for. There's more of a huge equipment auction site, so we would be going to Post Falls with these, and other than getting them over there, there's really no cost to the city. And with that, any questions?
Yeah, Kiki, questions?
Tim, how many of these did the city purchase new, or were any of these purchased as used vehicles? Do you know?
They were all new, or one of those ATVs came from fire that was handed down to Parks. That sander was purchased new in 1992.
Dan?
Nope.
Nothing?
Pretty routine.
Look for a motion, please.
I would move to recommend council declare various pieces of used assets, including vehicles, as surplus property, and authorize the streets and engineering department staff to dispose of the property at auction.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Consent, please. Thank you. Dennis Grant, welcome back. It's been a while since we've seen you.
All right. Got 2 items today. Good afternoon first, council members. It's a good day out there, a little bit of rain. This first vacation request, I have a map up there for you to look at. It's on along Celtice Way there going into Northwest Boulevard. The applicant is Glacier Northwest Boulevard Celtice LLC, and they're requesting the vacation of a portion of Celtice Way right-of-way that adjoins the northeasterly boundary of their property on Celtice Way. The requested right-of-way was relinquished to the city of Coeur d'Alene through an agreement with the Idaho Transportation Department effective on December 30th, 2004. The vacation of the requested right-of-way would not have any financial impact on the city and would add approximately 1,986 square feet to the county tax roll. The purpose of this request is to provide for additional development area on the referenced parcel. The applicant has provided an easement to the city to accommodate a portion of the planned multi-use trail along Celtice Way. With this multi-use path construction next year, not this year, but next year, the additional right-of-way will not be needed by the city. All utilities are existing and in place, and the development review team was informed about this vacation and did not have any concerns. Staff recommends to the Public Works Committee to proceed with the vacation process as outlined in Idaho Code Section 50-1306, and to recommend to the City Council the setting of a public hearing for this item on June 19th, 2018.
Dennis, can you use the mouse and show us where that is?
Yeah.
It's real hard to see it.
You want to see what? I'm sorry, Councilman Woody?
Where the right-of-way is?
Oh, yeah, let me give you the
What
other.
you're talking about here?
Yeah, the other, oh, it is hard to see. Oh, it's right there, there's a little red, I don't know if it'll zoom, it's not zooming in, but there's a little red area. And I have another map for you to see also. But this is more of a vicinity map, and then this next one I'll show you is the document, the actual document itself.
So it really is a odd-shaped, skinny
It's
little
just a
sliver.
thin little piece to help accommodate the Centennial, well, it helps everybody, the city and the Centennial Trail out.
So
And
it
Parkwood Properties.
doesn't infringe into Celtice Way. That's kind of like an on-ramp, right, onto
Yeah,
Northwest
it's,
Boulevard?
I forget the name of that little offshoot there. That's correct, yeah. And with the project that's happening next year, that will be relocated. So it won't infringe on that. That's correct.
Questions? Keith?
So Dennis, is this, I think I know right where my office building used to be, right in this corner. But is there, this
Currently a vacant lot.
allows that trail? It seems like there was a grant that we got to put in curb and all
That's
of that.
correct.
And so this allows that to be
It
part of the
helps with that,
contiguous
that is
piece?
correct. That's part of that project, in a sense.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
There's a trail on both sides.
Dan? Questions?
Nope.
Okay, I'll look for a motion, and thanks.
Well, I would make a motion to recommend that council authorize staff to proceed with the vacation process as outlined in Idaho Code Section 50-1306, and to set a public hearing for June 19th, 2018.
Second.
Moving second, any other questions? Giving away dirt, don't you love it? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Consent, please. Dennis, one more time, you got
Yeah.
some more stuff to get rid of.
We got a second vacation here. The applicant is Miller Stauffer Architects, and they're requesting this vacation of right-of-way. And the requested right-of-way was originally dedicated to the city of Coeur d'Alene in Ann's Addition plat in 1991. It stated on the plat that the final right-of-way would be determined by the city of Coeur d'Alene upon final determination of the location of the collector street. With the water department's future building going in on Howard Street there and the compost facility to the north, the proposed vacated right-of-way has no foreseeable use by the city of Coeur d'Alene. Just to talk about the vicinity map there, it's just north of the 911 center there, the Kootenai County. And Miller Stauffer's, on behalf of them, is requesting that 41 feet there. And I have another picture for you. It's the actual document. record of survey. Shows it a little closer there. The purpose of this request is to provide for additional developable area on the reference parcel. All utility easements will remain in place, and the development review team was informed about this vacation and did not have any concerns. Staff recommends to the Public Works Committee to proceed with the vacation process as outlined in Idaho Code 50-1306 and to recommend to the City Council the setting of a public hearing for the item on June 19th, 2018.
Questions?
No, I would just say, I mean, we know that land is tough to come by, and it looks like this is a perfect place where we can kind of be good neighbors with another governmental entity, and, you know, 911 service certainly is a benefit to everybody, so I don't see any downside.
Keith?
I don't think it's going to interrupt the compost facility expansion, so
Yeah.
we'll still be able to do free core to grain right there.
So I have a couple questions. Can you
Yeah.
go back to that first map,
Sure.
the bigger one? So originally that was held for the alignment of Howard. Is that correct? Like Howard was going to push through to Julia at kind of the, back in the 90s, we thought that might be.
Yes, originally there was right-of-way that went from Howard clear to Ramsey. And there's a big pit there for the dump site. And then the subdivision to the west of Julia came in, and apparently they vacated that area also. And so that blocked it off. And then with that new intersection at Howard and, is that Niter there? There was a possibility that we could go through on the north side of that subdivision and the 911 center and that existing parcel there. But there really wasn't any way to go through to Ramsey with the state pit there. So, and now with the water department building their new facility there, I guess next year or whenever that happens, there's really no need to have that right away there. Especially the area in red, because it's actually below where the future street could possibly be.
Hopefully we can still pile up compost when they give it away there, right?
The gate's up further, yeah.
Well, the compost is actually, you can see up north there where the piles are for that. But that's where the future there's plenty of room, I'm sure. You could ask wastewater department about that. That's a good question for them.
That was a trick question, Dennis.
Yeah, you did
That
good.
was- All right, look for a motion, and thanks, Dennis.
Okay, thanks.
I would make a motion that we authorize staff to proceed with vacation process as outlined in Idaho Code. I'm on the right one because we're giving away so much land here. Idaho Code 50-1306 and set a public hearing for June 19th.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any other questions, comments? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Consent, please. Well, it's been a while. Chris, nice to see you, all the way from the street department.
Good to see you.
Engineering, welcome to Public Works.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here. It's the Streets and Engineering Show today, apparently. So I'm before you today to request rejection of the bid for the Celtice Sidewalk Project, as it was originally called. It's actually a shared use path. We went out to bid on this project, and we only got one responsive bid that was about $170,000 more than what we had set aside and what the federal funding was going to be for that. So in talking with the state of Idaho, who is administering this grant, we are allowed to reject this bid and make some changes to the plans and specifications for it, and then go back out to bid at a better time for bidding, which would be in the fall or maybe even the winter, but I'm thinking fall might be a good time to do that. And then the construction can take place in the spring next year, and the contractor will have more time to get it done before the busy season of the year and not be under such such constraints to get it done. And this, ironically, this is the piece that Dennis was just asking for vacation on. So, yes, same project. But they're both going to happen. I mean, this will move forward. We're not going to stop this project. We just don't have the funding to do it this year with the bid that we received, and we're confident that we can improve upon that by rebidding in the fall. So I would stand for any questions you may have on that.
Well, just wonder if, when all is said and done, are you going to kind of reduce size of it or something in order to hope it comes in cheaper, or it's more of a timing?
I think it's more of a timing thing because contractors are really busy this year, and which was evidenced by the fact that we only got one bid when we advertised for that as well. So we're thinking that maybe in the fall, when things calm down construction season-wise, when contractors are looking to fill their schedule for the next year, we'll have a better opportunity then. And this, the part that that Dennis was talking about is down here where that vacation would take place. And this path actually runs all the way up to the Centennial Trail right here, except for this portion that has already been constructed by developers in that area.
Questions, Geek?
Does this, because of the grant, does it have a specific number of working days and a start time that's specified, or can it be?
It's flexible. We had set that for this bid as well.
Okay.
We were hoping to just get it done and out of the way before, you know, Memorial Day weekend and all that, but or 4th of July, more likely. But
if you bid it in the fall, you'd have the opportunity to have a longer start time. And
correct, yes. So as soon as the weather breaks and they could get out there and start work on it.
Okay.
If there's no other questions, I'll look for a motion, please.
Well, I would make a motion. Was it your turn?
No.
Okay.
I forgot.
I would make a motion that council reject the sole bid for the construction of the shared use path on Southeast Way between Riverstone Drive and Northwest Boulevard.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Consent, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
And here's one of those ones we've never done that'll be really fun because it's Renata.
Well, actually, I did do them because remember I was on general services.
Oh, that's right. You've been
So I-
there. Well, parades, special events, public assemblies, catering permits. Oh,
Some of
my
the good
goodness.
stuff. Yeah.
Yes, we're bringing you the Big Kahuna today. This is a project that your staff has been working on for quite some time. So when I say your staff, I mean we've been working with police, fire, parks and recreation, streets department, and municipal services, and of course legal, to bring this all forward. So a while back, the council had asked staff to kind of take a look at this code and look for ways to make it a little more user-friendly, a little more event-friendly, and actually set it up so that it reflects what our current operating procedures are. So we have done that. We've worked with the Downtown Association, the Chamber of Commerce, and the trail groups in town. Gave them a chance to look at this latest version and give input. And with their input, there was one section that was a little confusing, so we were able to reword that so it made a little more sense to them as well. In addition to that, we've been requested several times to have more than one event per day. So we're bringing you forward some code changes that would allow for that under certain circumstances. So it wouldn't be too high impact type events where we wouldn't have enough staff to handle that. But we feel if it was two low impact events or a low and a medium or two medium impact events, we as staff could handle that based on what the event request was. So we've brought those changes forward as well. So today you're going to be looking at several code sections. I have it up on the screen here for you. So we have several chapters in our code that have little touches to different sections of parades and special events and outdoor assemblies. So we have chapter 4.25 that specifically deals with parks and public properties. So when you're looking at the changes in that section, you have to remember you're dealing with just city-owned properties. And so in that section, we really wanted to say when it's a larger event of 1,000 or more people, that it should follow the same process we use for our parades and special events that happens in the streets. So that involves all the other city departments, like police and fire. So we can look at the impacts of what that event in the park or other public property has on the streets for traffic control and public safety type stuff. So that was really our intent with that section. And then again, in 4.30, it's activity on public property. And before, the code was a little confusing. It sounded like it was only for musical venue events that were happening at private properties. So we really clarified that to be more about the number of participants. Again, with that impact to some of the public streets and right-of-ways and security needed from police and fire's perspective. So then as we move on to 5.17, that's the alcohol beverage catering permits. The Idaho Code actually changed last year to include some definitions for festivals that last more than 3 days, and our code really just needed to catch up with what was going on with the state code. In addition, we have some of the folks that pull catering permits that maybe just didn't have a real good memory that they needed a catering permit, and so they weren't meeting the 3-day timeline required in our code. And now we're upping that to a 5-day timeline because some of the new venues, police and fire want to take a closer look at. So we needed a little bit more time to circulate it through all the departments and get the input needed from public safety. So we also wrote in a little clause that if they wanted to have an expedited review, they could do that for an additional fee. So there may be somebody coming in a panic. Before, we had no administrative right to help them, and we just have to tell them no, they couldn't have their event. So this gives us all a little out for those emergent situations. And we'll be bringing some fee stuff forward to you in July, and that would be included in
I
that.
have a question in regards to 517. That's
Yep.
just for liquor.
Beer and wine and liquor.
And
Yeah.
alcohol.
Beer, wine, and liquor. So when they're serving it off of their licensed premise.
Okay, thank you.
So then we move on to 5.44. Again, that's outdoor assemblies. So that's, again, some of these private property events. This was the one with the music assembly verbiage, sorry. So this also clarifies that we're setting the security and the fees associated with that under resolution. And then it would require the public safety and crowd control plans if they were expecting over a certain number of people to attend those events.
So let me ask you, what is the difference between 4.3 and 5.44? Assemblies, public property. Assemblies are on public property?
So the 5.44 is for private property.
Private,
And
got
the
it.
4.30 is for public property.
Thank you.
See, I know it gets confusing. That's why I have to have my little cheat sheet ahead of me
Good,
as
you
well.
got it.
So then again, with chapter 10.60, that's the one specific to parades and special events and public assemblies in our streets and rights-of-ways. So those are the things we most commonly see, the block watches, the 4th of July parades, the kiddie parades, those type of items are all housed under 10.60. This is the method where we're receiving the applications in the Municipal Services Department. All of the regulations that are in 10.60, we kind of go through a checklist, make sure they are meeting all those requirements, and then we actually have a meeting with all the various departments. So it includes street departments for pulling the barricades and how we're going to bring those into town and who's setting them up. It'll include police and fire for those public safety needs, whether it's a triathlon and they're going to need paramedics. And for police, where do they need to house those really high traffic intersections that might be intersecting with bikes and such. So the 10.60 is really one of our bigger chapters that we deal with most often for what people see as parade and special events in our communities. So we tidied up some of the stuff in there, clarified some things, and added in the information there I talked about earlier for allowing those 2 events per day, because right now we are restricted to just 1 event per day. And so we have a couple folks that have come to the table and said, hey, I want to come through your town in August, and they're just doing a bike ride kind of on the trail and ending in NIC, but it's the same day we have a triathlon going that starts at Independence Point and goes up to Higgins. So most of the resources we have are at the triathlon, But this one little bike ride called Ride Idaho just kind of comes into town, and it just sprinkles in a couple people throughout the day because they're riding throughout the state of Idaho. So this is just one of their stopping places. So it's really not a high impact for staff, but right now we have to tell them our code doesn't allow them to do that. So if they're going to ride Idaho, they have to skip Coeur d'Alene on that day. And it's really not a huge impact to police and fire. So we really felt like that's a good example of why we want to allow those two events. So we can do it safely and have knowledge they're here, and they don't have to break our code by just riding through.
So does that mean if this goes through the whole process, it could work in time for that event this year?
Yes, that would be in August, yeah.
Where's the farmer's market fall into that? Does it fall in streets,
So
10-6?
So they're in 10.60. They're a special event permit for road closure. And then they do that on just a shortened amount of blocks, so they're deemed a low-impact event.
And then where's the booze fit into them, the liquor? We're doing sampling wine right now.
So under the Idaho code, they're allowed to serve a 1 ounce pour, and it doesn't require a catering permit.
Okay.
So it's under Idaho code. That's outside of our jurisdiction.
Okay, Keek? Jump in there, girl.
I'm gonna get in trouble for flipping my papers now,
Okay.
I can tell. This is good work. There's just a lot that needed to be brought up and brought up to speed. So I have a couple things I've touched on, and one is that it used to provide, I believe, in the parks as well as in the parades and streets, that there was a 1,000 or 1,500 person limit per event before you fell into the large-scale event category. So if you were small scale, it was dealt with one set of code and then moved to large scale. The verbiage used to say at any given time, and now it's not in there. So that I wanted to know what the discussion was behind that, and it kind of concerned me if you have an event like Farmers Market, where there could easily be 1,000 people go through there, but not all at the same time for the duration of the event. But between 4 o'clock and 8 o'clock, 1,000 people, 500 at a time could filter through there. So how is that going to be, why is that changed, and how is that going to be defined?
So in our discussions, the whole park and public property venue was always kind of housed under our Parks Department, and they handled it all. So in our discussions, it really was police and fire and streets really wanted to be involved and have a say in what happens when we have these large-scale events, because it doesn't just happen in the parks. The parking and the pedestrians overflows outside of the park for them transitioning between places and parking. And so it really was a discussion with all the staff to say, let's draw a line in the sand and say, if it's over this amount, then we're going to run it like we do our special events permit, and we're all going to be at the table and have a discussion about what is needed to manage that event. So if you have an event that is like a farmer's market, people coming and going all day, but it is expected to have more than 1,000 people, it really is just setting up a separate system to be able to involve police and fire to say, do we need more for this event? Do we need a safety plan or not? And maybe the answer is not, but they wanted a line in the sand to say, at this point, we're going to run it just like we would the farmer's market and have that same process and procedure in place. Doesn't mean that it will be any more restrictive. It just means they get to have a say in it now. They're coming to the table, and it's part of that discussion.
Okay. Not sure I'm trying to see the process of why that would work, other than that there's more staff time required to come to the table to make that decision, more governance where it may not be needed, and I don't know that you want to burden the staff with that if that's the case. I'm looking at some of these smaller little events in the park but they go on all day long, and some of the even, like I said, farmers market, it just seems like that would be one that, yes, all departments could come to the table and say, yes, we don't need any further work, but I just wonder if we're just adding work and expense when we don't need to by not leaving the verbiage like it was that said at any given time. So,
And to clarify,
yeah.
when I say we all come to the table, sometimes that's electronically. So it doesn't,
Yeah.
it's not a physical meeting sometimes, it's a, here's the application, do you guys want more input?
yeah, and I can see where our city's moving into, where we're gonna have potentially large-scale events that are ticketed, and, you know, thousands of people in one spot at one time, and that has to be dealt with, especially if there's another event, you know, a parade going on the street. So I get that. That one had me a little scratching my head on that. So then there was some other things in there that talked about venue, and I did not see a definition of the venue. So as McEwen has changed and Four Corners has changed, and even, you know, some properties that are within the city are getting used differently than they were before. So we have, say, the little park at 7th Street has a gazebo, and that's a venue, but not a facility. So is there going to be some look at what the language is that defines that piece of this ordinance that isn't on the page?
I will check with Bill Greenwood before the next council meeting, and if we don't have one already in the definition section, because that would be a different section than what I provided you guys today, then we will get one in there.
Cool. And I did see there were people who went to the 7th Street Park, and you could have a picnic event, family reunion at that gazebo, and also there was some sword fighting people doing another thing, and it's a very small park. So I was just wanting to clarify, if we're making this change, what we're going to call a venue and how that works. So thank you for that. And then who is the go-to person that is it municipal services, your department, that can manage all of these permits and the details and the functions, and you call them together?
So, again, back to our lovely little explanation up here. Anything that's under 4.25 and often 4.30 is the Parks Department. So if it happens in a park facility, then they're the ones that handle those permits. So anything else comes through the municipal services side of the house, and if somebody wants to do parade and an event in the park, then we all coordinate together on that and make sure that we're all on the same page. But most of the time, people know if they want the gazebo and an event in the park, they start in the Parks Department. And then if they start talking to parks and go, oh yeah, and we wanted to do a little parade, then they go, okay, you gotta pull in this other side of the house. But they are two separate sort of silos in the code and functionally internally.
Okay, and so there really isn't anything in the code other than the great communication internally that parks would know if somebody applied for a permit that there happened to be a parade on that day, and even though that was in a separate part of the code, they might conflict if the permit had a lot of people going back and forth across an intersection where the parade may be staging. So the ordinance doesn't really have those two departments or doesn't connect those two permits, but it would just be an internal administrative function?
We do, and we also have a special calendar that folks that are expecting over 200 people, we've requested them to put it on this internal calendar, and we all have access to it. It's called Special Events Calendar in our Outlook. So when the library is expecting more than 200 people, they put it on there. When we get a special event or a parade that's expecting more, we put it on there. And we've asked parks to put theirs on there so that police and fire, if they're driving down the street and they're like, what's going on at the library? There's a ton of people there. What's going on? You know, they can pull it up and they can see, oh, it's the Lego festival this weekend or the tea or whatever. And then they can look at parks. Oh, yeah. And then there was this thing for, you know, family day in the park or kids day in the park, that they can see what's going on in total. But we do have that internal functionality.
So then they can individually see if it was a
We hope. We're trying.
approved event.
We put the technology out there, and we're still
Good.
working out on the finer points. But
Is that something that has ever been talked about being made public, just for the purposes of people not putting events on top of parades?
we haven't quite determined how to do our internal Outlook externally. So I think it would take somebody else putting it on an external calendar, which would be one more step. But we try to update that website calendar to include those things, but we'll work on it.
Work on that website. Yeah, work on that communication, yay. So then a couple other things I had. In here, this language now has been changed to say that certain departments, police and fire, may require conditions to a permit which they deem necessary to ensure public safety, which is good but vague. And so I was wondering what the discussion was around, is there a check and balance for that? And I mentioned to you earlier that the city clerk, although manages this part administratively, I guess what I'm looking forward to as we grow down the road and there's more and more requests for events that may step on each other, I would hate to see the city in an unhealthy decision-making process where they had one person or one position who had unilateral decision on who could have an event and who couldn't. It just feels like we could be in jeopardy of being accused of playing favorites or not. And so I just want to make sure that's been discussed and there's some things like, is it the sole discretion of one person and that sort of thing? So can we just talk about that for a second?
Sure. The code is set up that if people comply with these code requirements, they're eligible for a permit. So when you go through the municipal code and you say, for example, under the catering permits, if they have a liquor license, if it is in a premise that has the proper exits pursuant to our fire code, if this, then they're eligible for a catering permit. So there's certain things already in the code that sets up staff to succeed, to say, well, okay, they've met all the code requirements, then we can issue the permit. So it's giving that point person to say, they're responsible to read the code and know the code. That's our job, to make sure they've met everything that's in the code before we issue it. With the parades and special events, outdoor assemblies, and public property use, it does sometimes come down to police and fire justification for what they think is safe. And some of it's, if the venue wants to do fireworks, it's going to be a different safety checklist than if it's just a band on a stage. So it is hard to put everything in a code. If this, then you'll have to do this. If this, then you'll have to do this. And some of it is, fire code sitting out there as uniform fire code, separate from municipal codes. So you don't want to double duty and put everything that's already in a state code in your city code. It's just kind of that, as each in their professional opinion looks at each event, and each event can be very unique to what the safety and security plan needs to be. So we did have a lot of discussion between police and fire and legal, and that was really the best way to kind of bring it forward, as they're going to look at each one individually, and as police and fire, they'll make those determinations. Currently, for at least the parade and special events, we have so many of the same ones each year that it's not a real surprise. So when the Coeur d'Alene Triathlon comes forward and, police is saying you need to have traffic control people at these intersections and you guys have to pay for it, we don't have staffing to do that. They know. It's the last 5 years it's been the same. We're going to place a paramedic over here and a paramedic over here. Where's your guys' first aid tent? They know those things are coming forward. But we wouldn't do that for the kiddies parade. The kiddies parade is pretty short and quick. We have the barricades set up and, it's not as intense. So those are the things that they kind of just look at on a case-by-case basis.
Can I ask a question while you're on that subject? So things going on. So some of the things that have been going on for years, do they always have priority, or are they booked ahead to where they get priority?
So the code allows them to book up to 1 year out. Okay. So generally what happens is the chamber comes in the next day from their event and says, we want to book next year. Okay. So what we've agreed to with them is if they place their security deposit, then they get that date. We lock it down based on that. Okay. So when somebody comes in and says, well, I think I want this date, I'm like, well, I can make a note over here, but it's not locked in until you bring your security deposit in. Okay. So that way it gives us that kind of check and balance of somebody saying, well, you're just giving them all to the chamber. We can say, but they've placed their security deposit, and if you want to come in and put your security deposit the day after your event, we can do that too, but only a year out.
So along the same lines, so we have a concert in McEwen with liquor. At the same time, the Carousel is doing a fundraiser selling wine. Skate Park's having a big, crazy party with beer. 7th Street's got a family reunion with beer. Mm-hmm. That's all doable. Because they don't overlap each other? Or how would that, each one stands alone?
So all those events that are in the parks would come into the Parks Department, and I'm assuming, they have to make sure they've rented their gazebo, they pay their fees for security and go through the whole process of checks and balance on their security. So as far as the catering permits, yes, if they have their city permits and they take a catering permit from someone like Iron Horse who has a license, they can go to these off-premise locations and have liquor sales.
So it
But
could all be
not
done on
all
the
those
same
venues,
day?
I don't think, are allowed in our city code. So the skateboard park, I don't think is allowable to have alcohol there. I think we've divided it up into just 4 parks: Jewett House, City Park, McEwen, and Riverstone, I think.
Riverstone, okay.
I played the game you were playing
Yeah.
and said, this is sort of like a multi-level chessboard.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, you could in this park, but not this park.
Yeah.
But on this day, you could if this event isn't here. But
Yeah.
if this event is here, then the parade can't happen. But if the parade doesn't happen, then this run isn't going to happen
Right.
anyway. And these people drink beer, but they'll go over to this place, and it's private property. So sorry
Yeah.
about that, but
Yes.
it is very much.
Well, and they
so
could
it
always
is very
ask
much
for
like
it.
So
that.
now we would be able to say, yes, skateboarders, you can have your fundraisers. You still may not be able to have beer there because we haven't changed the code to allow you to have it there.
Change
But
the
we
code.
could have several venues having events on the same day if the Parks Department staff can manage it. So when they see them come in, they'll do first come, first serve like we do. And if they have enough staff to manage that many events, then you may have your event.
So it's their call based on staffing?
At this point, yes.
And yet, when we go to call for police or fire, it's just pay money, right?
Not always. So in the parade and special event example,
Yeah.
if we had a triathlon going on, say to Higgins Point, like the one that's happening in August, and we had another triathlon want to come in and run from NIC to the other segment of town, those would be maybe too intense for police and fire to man 2 triathlons in one day. So we would have to say no to that. We wouldn't have enough staffing for police and fire to man those events. But if it's a low impact and a higher impact, we could handle it. But that would still be based on the request coming in and analyzing what are the needs for that event.
Okay, that helps, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Very good.
Thank you.
She's thought
So
this
in
through, huh?
analyzing, yeah, there's a
We've had a
lot
lot
to
of
this. I know, I
conversations.
appreciate it, I really do. So there's a lot to, there's more than just police, fire, and municipal services that would look at this. Parks would look at it, likely. You may even get streets people involved depending on the infrastructure impact and that sort of thing. So that's kind of what this broader language is intended to do.
Mhm.
I have just one more, I
Sure,
think.
no, this is the opportunity. We want to
yeah.
have these discussions.
It is very, and I see that, with new things in the future, I'm seeing there's probably gonna have to be another look at this here in a
Absolutely.
year or two.
I think
And
you're
say,
right.
how is this going to impact what we're doing? Block watch event is a specific word that's been added to this. And I always thought block watches were sort of the identified through our city police, and maybe I'm not looking at that. What is this definition of block watch?
And there actually is a definition in the code. It's just not one we're amending, so it's not included in this ordinance.
Okay,
But there is a specific definition of block watch, and it does have to be a recognized group from our police department. And what we've done in this code is sort of held them out as being waived. So they still have to come in and notify us of their event, but they don't pay a fee, and there can be as many block watches on a day as we can
see.
allow barricades in streets.
Okay.
So,
so these neighborhood gatherings can occur without conflict of the ordinance. Okay, that explains that part.
Very
think I'm-
good. You're
I think I'm
good.
done.
And this is gonna go before council, correct?
Well, they will have
Yeah.
seen the notes, so maybe they'll get their questions asked.
Dan?
Well, just to know that, I mean, that went through it very thoroughly, but also to acknowledge, with that ordinance revision process, I mean, I can just, appreciate the amount of work that went in, and I'm guessing since the staff is essentially asking for this, in terms of, gee, is it going to be too much for them? Well, they think it's a good idea, and given, unfortunately, I mean, kind of the climate of society out there, whatever, that, if we're going to bend a little bit more towards the public safety concerns or make that kind of a priority, that's probably a reasonable thing to do, and nobody wants to get, carried away too much. But so, no, I think that's good.
All right.
I still do have would like a little more conversation on the number of people and the at any given time. I do think that kind of, I was thinking about maybe the Fisherman's Show and all of that, where they'll probably have 1,000 people, but it'll be going on from 8 o'clock till 5 o'clock. And I don't know that, being required to create exit strategy plans and things like that still have some questions about that one. But other than that, it's just a lot of work and very, very, very necessary and appreciated. So.
You're welcome.
So let's just push this to the council agenda. You guys are good with that?
Yeah, I think it should.
And then whatever you see that you feel it needs to be addressed, it'd be great. And pictures are always good too. For no apparent
Show you
reason.
pictures of our meetings and.
There you go. All right, so we'll put that on the agenda. Thank you. That's it? Oh, we still have
And
one
do we-
more, huh?
Did we make a motion on that, or do we need to?
I thought we could just kill it.
Oh.
Just push it. We're
With
good?
no recommendation.
I'll say item 8. Oh, more beer and wine license.
So actually, I should have listed my deputy city clerk, Kelly Setters. We're going to have her present this item to you today, and
Welcome,
I'll
Cal.
just sit back and
Don't be
assist if
afraid.
needed. Okay, I'm not.
Just show your pictures. It takes the pressure off.
Staff report?
Okay. Okay, so we're seeking recommendation of council's approval for amendments to the municipal code listed in your staff report pertaining to alcohol licensing. Over the years, the municipal services staff has experienced several delays in the issuance of alcohol beverage licenses due to the strict language in the code, which in the past, for example, I have 3 businesses this year, and we renew in March, so 3 different businesses had to delay their opening because they missed the council meeting, just for a simple thing like changing the name or transfer of ownership. So, currently all licenses must first be approved by city council, and there's nothing in the code that allows staff to approve a simple ownership or issuance of temporary when the business has a state and county license. In addition, there is no provision for city council to deny these licenses if they meet the municipal code requirements. So the approval is just a heads up to the council, really, when it goes forward for name changes and those minor things. It is the plan to continue to inform the council by a heads up email. So we'll continue to do that to let you know what's going on in the city and who's transferring what. These proposed changes would expedite license issuance to businesses that already received approval from the state and the county. And there's minimal cost associated to make these changes, the codification costs, and if we went to public hearing, we'd have the cost of notifying the newspaper. So I stand for any questions you may have.
Well, let me start off, since those things are so valuable to me and the people I work with.
Okay.
So this is saying that if you're a new business and you have a new license and, oh, I forgot to do this, that it's okay in the city of Coeur d'Alene. You may have your state liquor license and you have your county, but you haven't gotten around to getting this city. Is that
It's like
what
they're misinformed, the customer or the person that owns the business. Like they're coming to town, they're going to open a business and they're going to buy it from you and say, okay, well, I went to the state and did my transfer. Went to the county. Oh, I got to go to the city? Okay. And then they're like, I go, well, we have to take it forward to council. They have to approve everything that
Right.
changes on these alcohol licenses.
Okay. So does that still work at the end of the year then, too? Can it be worked that way, that, oops, I forgot to put in for my city license, even though I have the state and the county in March?
Most of the time, Woody, it's not a new business.
It's just renewals.
It's an
and-
existing business that is either
transferring ownership to a new person, but say it's Kelly Pub and Grill, and it's gonna be Kelly's Pub and Grill, it's just now gonna be owned by Dan instead of Woody.
Gotcha.
And so they don't understand the length of time required to make that transfer, because they've already gone to the state and the county, and they got it done like that. Then they come to the city, and we say, oh, well, we're not having another council meeting for 2 weeks, so you have to wait until that Tuesday to get approved, then you could start serving drinks on Wednesday. So we're saying in those circumstances, if we had administrative authority, we could approve the transfer because the location hasn't changed, the type of beer and wine or liquor that they're selling hasn't changed, it's only the owner that's changed.
This is showing a new business is opening, is the verbiage, so that's telling me it's not necessarily an old license or a transferred license. Am I misunderstanding a new business is opening?
Which section are you looking at?
That's right in
Woody?
the history in your,
Oh, in the staff report.
yeah, in the
Oh,
staff report.
Sorry, that
That's
would
what
just be bad verbiage there, sorry.
okay.
So, oh yeah, it says
The-
new businesses is opening,
New-
not new license, not
New
new
licenses,
alcohol
yeah.
license.
Okay, so this doesn't impact the first of the year thing? There's no attaboys, if you don't get your license in time, you wait? Okay, so this is in the transfer world, okay.
So it's just in the transfer world to stop the gap between the date they had applied and the next council meeting, and that's specifically what this is for. Not for any other loopholes, new businesses, end-of-year renewals, that all stays the same. And since there's no risk, there's no provision for the council to deny it anyway, it's kind of an exercise in paperwork. What is the risk? Is there any risk to doing this? What, have you looked at it?
No, the only thing that gets to be a hang-up is when you have a new location for a beer and wine license. Because you really have to look at how close they are to a park or a church or a residential zone. And that's something we're looking at right now, is how other cities are dealing with that. Because we currently have a requirement that they have to go around and petition the neighbors within, I think it's 600 feet, and they have to get 60% approval. So we had some circumstances where maybe it's a ethnic restaurant that wants to sell beer and wine, and they seem to have a little more difficulty getting their petition signed than maybe a traditional Americanized type restaurant. And so we really want to look at, is there a more fair way to do that, that still maybe informs the neighborhood, but maybe isn't such a high impact with that chance of maybe a little bit of bias. So we'll be bringing this forward again to you guys with maybe some new language and some better ways that we can handle those new licenses.
New.
Yeah.
But this is just for, yeah, ownership transfer, and to stop that wait to the next council meeting for approval.
Dan?
Well, I guess my thought is, I'm kind of amazed that it hasn't been changed before now, because this is going to make for much better customer service. And, you know, kind of in my prior life, county clerk, and they do the liquor licenses at the recorder's office and all that, and, you know, it's kind of like, well, gee, if they had to run down, let's say they had to run down the clerk in person to do that, and, well, he'll be back next Tuesday or something, and it's, no, so, I mean, this is absolutely, I think, a proper administrative function with plenty of checks and balances, and, you know, in this case, goes on the side of customer service, so.
Sounds good. So I take it you guys are supportive of this moving forward?
Mhm.
Good.
Do we need a motion?
Go ahead.
You can read that one.
Oh, my gosh.
I was trying to get around it, you know. It's going to the agenda. Do we have to make a motion?
Read once by
Make a
title only.
motion that we read all the numbers and send it to the agenda, that we, I can do it, recommended that council approve the proposed amendments to municipal code section 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 of them as stated regarding issuance of beer, wine, and liquor licenses.
Second.
Second, been moved and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Yay, put it on the agenda, and we're gonna call it a day. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
You.
Adjourned, huh?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Reading the title, come on.
We're adjourned. Jeez. Trying to finish in the hour.